To anyone out there who's feeling stuck right now, maybe your life isn't falling apart. Maybe it's actually asking you to realign. Feeling stuck in life doesn't actually mean you've always failed. So sometimes it means that you've outgrown what you had to be to survive. If you feel stuck in your relationships, in work, finances, or spiritual life, it might not be a sign to push harder. It might actually be a sign to pause, listen, and do a course correction. Because being stuck is often not the end of the road. It's the moment that your inner truth starts asking for a different direction. So sometimes the reason that you feel stuck is because your soul has stopped agreeing with the life that your conditioning built.
Mm. If you're actively seeking ways to build your mental toughness, navigate life transitions with grace, or simply find inspiration to keep moving forward, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Art of Beautiful Thinking podcast. Welcome to the Art of Beautiful Thinking. My name is Yvette and I'm here with my co-host Kat. Now, to anyone feeling stuck right now, this may be less about doing more and more about becoming honest about what is no longer in alignment with you. Now, sometimes it can actually mean that your outer life no longer matches your inner truth. And that's something that Kat and I found through life, hasn't it? Especially over probably the last 12 months.
Because we'd both given our other professional lives a red hot go. And we came to the conclusion that we weren't stuck because of our own failings. We were just in the wrong space.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
I'm doing it because I need to do it because I've got to pay the bills, but
Yep.
it doesn't make my heart sing. And then looking for ways of going, well, what can I do differently? And for me, it was about finding the coaching path, why that was important,
Mm.
following the things that I was very passionate about, and bringing in two areas that I absolutely love in life, being personal growth and metaphysics. However, does not mean that everything has been smooth sailing since
Oh, God,
doing
no.
that. And the old programming is saying to you, I need to go back and get a job. I need to get a job. I need to get a job. I need to get a job. But you can't visualize a job. You can't see
Yeah.
yourself in a job. You've already outgrown that. And then what can also happen is the fear will take over you as well. And the monkey mind starts going crazy. And we speak about that quite a lot.
Mm.
But sometimes it's about staying strong on the path that you've chosen. And that's not to say that you shouldn't go off and get yourself a job if you're absolutely in financial dire straits.
Yeah.
But it's being very clear as to why you're doing it, but also not allowing your fear to be the thing that's dictating your decisions, and
Yes.
allowing yourself to be grounded and centered when you do make those decisions. And if you are looking for work, and it may not even be work. It could also be that you're stuck in a relationship that you no longer want to be in. However,
Yeah.
you're too scared to either have the conversation about it. And sometimes having the conversation actually clears up a lot of stuff, because
Yeah.
they could be feeling the same way. Or it could be that you do know that you've just got to leave, but you haven't done it. And when you do leave, a whole heap of new things will open up for you.
Well,
And it's trusting in that.
yeah, it is. It's being able to be in a place of self trust on that. Now, how do you do that? What is the practical, grounded approach to actually making sure you're making the right decision? And this is something we were discussing. How do we know, should you stay and push harder? And I'm talking job, relationships, life, financial decisions, whatever. A lot of people are going through mortgage shock. Should you stay and push harder to keep that house? Or should you say, okay, we've gone over the top now, we need to move and do something different? So all these questions, this is life, this is what comes into play. And I think to have the trust to be able to go through the voyage, which is quite transformation is a voyage, it's a journey. It's not something that just goes from A to B. You've got the great big long transitional period in the middle. So how do you know to do that? And that is the question. How do I know whether I should stay in the job, relationship, life moment, or pivot, realign, shift, and go somewhere different? How do you know? What's the difference between staying too long and 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 changing because I know I'm not in the right place versus leaving too quickly when I should have stayed and worked harder? How do you know the difference? Because that's the number one question.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's about listening to my intuition. So I really, really listen to my gut on
Mm.
things, and I allow that to direct me. And I also listen to my body as well, in the sense of going, how am I feeling in this situation. So if I were to continue being in this situation, do I feel that it's going to get better? Like this is just a moment in time and it's going to get better?
Yeah.
Or do I actually feel that I do have to actually leave? It's not going to get better. I can't see it getting better. And
Mm.
I really will go in and sit with it. And I sit with I'll ask myself the question and I'll sit with it and I'll sit with it in my body and see how my body responds to it. Now,
Mm.
that's very different to going, oh, but if I sit with it, all I feel is fear. And so the fear is telling me to do that. It's actually going past the fear
Yeah.
and becoming what they refer to as the observer. And when I say they refer to, I'm talking about spiritual practitioners, people who even psychotherapists,
Yes.
psychologists, they all talk about stepping back and observing and becoming the observer of you and of your situation. And
Mm.
if you were to look at that from an observer perspective, you see things with a different clarity
Me too.
and you can make a better choice, a better decision, because you're not actually being driven by the fear and you're not being driven by anxiety. You're actually being driven with an open mind
Mm.
and an open mind to go, okay, which is the best direction for me to take here?
So that requires a level of metacognition, thinking about thinking. So you're actually able to take a step back and go. For me, it's more about I look at it and go, okay, is this a structural problem or is this me? So the way I work that out is I go, if I were to engage all the tools in my toolbox, work harder at this situation, would it improve? Or, and if the answer's no, no, I'm stuck in a outdated workplace that has crappy values that promotes nepotism and cronyism over work ethic. No, that doesn't work for me. I'm in a relationship where the guy, we've reached peak relationship and I've employed every tool in the toolbox to try and improve communication. I'm still unhappy. He's not listening or he's disengaged and he's made it signaled to me that these conversations are a waste of time. Not really interested. I'm happy where we're at and that's all there is to it. No, that's a sign to move on. Or if I'm in a financial situation where I do the math and I go, well, if I keep pouring money into this, how am I going to look in 6 months' time or 5 years' time or whatever it is? So for me, it's more of although I know my body is telling me and my intuition is telling me, I also go through that cognitive process of saying, how does it look in 6 months or 5 years' time, whatever it is? If I keep doing the same thing, am I going to be happy and is it going to get better? Or is it a case of no amount of effort that I can see that I can put into this is going to improve this situation? That is when I'm saying to myself, okay, this is an environmental thing. It's not actually anything I can't control or improve this thing. That's a structural environmental situation. I need to move on. So that's a mismatch in a job, relationship, financial situation, whatever it is. And oftentimes you will feel stuck in that. And if it's making you feel powerless moving forward, making you feel trapped or like there's no way out and you feel as though things aren't going to get better or you're seeing a diminishing return for your effort, no, time to go.
And I think when you mentioned about the diminishing returns on your effort, one of the things that I do quite frequently, especially when I've been in the workforce or even a relationship, whether it's a friendship,
Yeah.
because I've been with my partner for a very long time, so it's usually friendships or work colleagues, things like that, is I will go, have I done my best? Have I done absolutely
Yes.
everything that I know of to improve this situation? And if I can answer that question honestly and say, yeah, I have, and I still can't see it changing, that's when I go, it's time to pivot. It's time to realign and go and do something else, or
Yes.
stop that friendship, or moving in a different direction with that friendship, or whatever.
Mm.
Or even from a financial perspective, I need to either go and ask for help, or I need to go and get a better paying job, or
Yep.
whatever. Yeah,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
it's realizing that you have done everything, because one of the things for me is I'm also a very proud person. I have a lot of pride about certain things, and my pride can get in the way. It's a strength, but it can also be a weakness.
I like
And
to think of it as self-respect, Eva. That's what I
it
like
is
to think of it.
self-respect, but it is. I mean, but
Yeah.
that's what happens when pride goes crazy. It's beyond self-respect, and it can turn into arrogance and all this type of stuff. Anyway, it's where I'm going with that is, and in fact, now I've lost where I was going with that.
You said you're a very proud person. I'm sorry, but I don't see you as proud. I've never seen that in you. I've always just seen you as very switched on and focused. But then,
It's proud in what I do,
yeah,
like
yeah,
I take pride in what I do,
yeah,
etc. And yeah, that's about it. So for me, if I walk away from a situation where I know that I haven't put in my best effort to try and make it
yes,
better, or
yeah,
to, as you said, pulled out all of my tools and I've utilized all the tools out of my toolbox and still nothing. But if I feel as if I haven't pulled out everything out of my toolbox, then I go, okay, no, stick around and do what you've got to do and see what happens. However, there's also the other side of that, the flip side of that, because I also have a high tolerance level for shit as well, which is crazy, but I do. Um, and that's from my upbringing, which means I've got to also be aware that I'm not tolerating it for the sake of tolerating it, and, and really basically whipping myself. So I've
it's
got to
hard,
look at the
isn't it?
situation from two different perspectives.
Mm,
And if I feel as if, no, I'm not whipping myself and I'm not forcing myself to stay in something because I've got a high tolerance level and I do feel that it's worthwhile putting more effort in,
yeah,
then that's when I go, okay, let's put all the effort in. And then after that is when I kind of do the self-reflection of, well, if I've done all of the effort and I've done my best and it's still not working, well, then it's
yeah,
time to move on. Because
yeah.
sometimes you're getting all the signs to move on, to do, whatever you need to do, and you ignore them because you feel that you know better than the universe. and, and then things start to happen in a negative way to start pushing you into another direction.
I've just seen
And
this. I've just
and I
seen this.
think that's what you've also got to be mindful
Mm.
of is, are you being pushed in another direction? And it's just your pride that is preventing you from being able to see that you need to change paths.
I've seen it in workplaces where, and I've done it myself. I've known this is a shit situation. It's not working. I'm just going to stick it out because I love my job. I might not like the structure that the job is in, but I'm loving what I'm doing and I don't know what else to do at the moment. And what will happen? Or I'm hanging in there because I'm getting some fat bonuses shortly. I know that this isn't a healthy environment for me, but if I shrink myself enough, I can fly under the radar and then think about what I'm going to do down the track. If you're kicking the can down the road because you're in pain, but it's not enough pain that you need to move on, or you can minimize the pain like you're talking about, sometimes the universe will come at you and go, well, you didn't listen. I said that you needed to go. You weren't listening to what I was saying. You didn't proactively move when I told you that you needed to move. You shut me out. So now you're going to learn. Because one thing I've learned is that if you don't learn the lesson the first time, then you'll learn it even if it's the 100th fucking time.
Exactly. But you'll eventually learn it. And it's funny because that's where that stuckness can often appear. Like, I find that stuckness often appears when growth needs to happen.
And we're averse to that growth because we're in pain. But this is what Tony Robbins says, right? You're in pain, but is it enough pain to make you embrace the pain of growth? Because growth is also painful.
Correct. Very painful. In
And the
fact,
fear of
growth
the
is very
unknown,
painful.
right? Often we'll sit
Yes.
with the painful known, because this is where that whole saying, out of the frying pan into the fire, comes from.
Yeah.
We always have that fear. It could be worse elsewhere. Could also be better elsewhere.
It could be. And if I look at our current situation that we were talking about earlier on before we got onto the podcast, I see it exactly that of old behavior coming in
Yes.
to sort of say, this is what you need to do. You need to go get a job. Because when you've been in the situation before, you've gone and got a job and it's made it all better. But I also know the reason why I built this business is so I don't have to go get a job.
Well, it makes
And
it all better temporarily, but it's not a
yeah,
sustainable
it's
fix.
not sustainable. And I know that it'll take me away from doing what I really need to do.
Yeah.
And that is because I'm building the business. I have no blueprint from past experience of when things are going to land, but I have a blueprint of a past experience from working in a job and what that looks like. And that, yes, it brings in a sense of security, because that's all it is. It's not real security. It's a sense of security because it's bringing in money to help meet your needs.
Yeah.
But because I don't have that blueprint for the business of when it's going to land, it's unknown
Whole new
for me.
territory. Whole new
It's totally
territory.
new territory. It's
Yeah.
unknown, and that's why the fear and the anxiety can come up. And that's the same when in other areas of your life. The reason why you kind of go, oh, I've got to stay here because this is the known, and I know this, and I know what it's going to look like. And even if it's painful, I still know it.
I still
It's
know that
still kind of
pain.
safe in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a safety thing. You know, you can accept that, yeah, it's going to suck. It's these conversations I've had with people I've worked with that absolutely fucking hate their job and they hate where they work and they hate the people they work with. And I'm one of those people that tends to have frank and open conversations with people, unfortunately, whether they like it or not. So it doesn't make me very popular. It makes me a great coach, but not very popular in the office.
Yeah.
So, and people will tell me all their stuff. So sometimes I've had conversations with people just quietly where I've gone, so why would you stay? If you hate it this much, why would you stay? And they go, everywhere's just as bad. And, changing, there's no guarantees when you change that anything's going to get any better. But this is the kind of thinking that is really common and it really, really stagnates you. Yes, there's fear of the unknown and you can make a move. Like I've certainly, my husband and I have been discussing this recently. We moved to Tasmania. We do not fit the culture. It is a very small town, regional culture down here. That's not knocking people. That's just how it is. We don't fit. It's like if I moved to China, I wouldn't fit there either. I'm too outspoken. I'm not knocking China. I just know that wouldn't fit me because it's just not who I am.
Well,
Um,
it's the alignment, isn't it? It's coming back to what aligns
yes,
with you.
yes,
And what usually happens is majority of us will go with what's familiar
yes.
rather than what is actually aligned. And if you've made a bad choice, like for instance, in your case, you say, well, we moved to Tasmania and only after we moved here did we actually realize that it wasn't a good fit.
Total different
That,
culture.
yeah, that's
Mm,
not a bad thing. It doesn't
no,
mean that you've failed. It doesn't mean that you've done something wrong.
massive
You
learning curve.
tried, you looked at it and you went, this doesn't work. So you pivot because it's not aligned to you. So you pivot. So it's the same thing. Um, I will look at this business and I go, well, the business is very aligned with
Mm,
me. It's very, it
mm-hmm.
makes my heart sing. I love what I do.
Yep.
We're just in the building phase. We're building it. We're building it. Okay. And that means at one point things will land and things will start coming together. But it's not going to happen if I allow my fear to tell me to go back and do a job.
Yep.
And the job takes me away from the time that I could be putting into this. But I've also got to be smart about it
Yeah.
and go, let's be smart, let's be strategic,
Yes.
rather than
Create the
just getting stuck in
conditions.
the problem.
Yes, yes. Let's create the conditions to allow the transformation. So, this is the biggest thing. When I was studying psych at uni, I remember that they talked about there's a lot of people that go into counseling and therapy. And the reason that they quit is because it's like the long dark voyage of the soul, right? You kind of have to take it. So I gave you that sort of the idea, I suppose, of you don't want to go to the same harbor. You're on a ship, you're in a voyage. You don't want to go back to the same harbor because you know that it's full of pirates and it's not going to work. Or it's just you've done everything you can to make it work there. It's not working. So you need to move and go somewhere else. Now, this is again relationships, work, life, whatever. And you know that you've got provisions and fuel to get you so far, and you think that there's better places on these other islands out this way, but you need to go across on that voyage, which could take quite some time to get there in the night. And in the
Yeah,
meantime, during that journey, the long dark journey of the soul, you are filled with doubt and worry and fear and concerns. And the people that let that overtake them turn around and go back to Pirate Cove where they know things are not going to work out, but they know that things aren't going to work out in a way that makes them feel safe. They'll just manage to eke out an existence. Whereas they missed out on going to Hawaii and having a great time. So yeah, I mean it's all about the steadfastness of being able to continue through that journey and not expecting. I think one of the things we do is we expect pivots and realignments and changes. We go, oh, that's going to be hard, but then we don't realize that actually, yeah, it is going to be hard, but you've got to commit to that.
yeah, it's
That
part of
takes
it. It's
time.
part of it because what you get out of it isn't just the outcome of whatever it is that you're looking for. It's also the growth of who you
It's
become
the
as a
growth.
person. And
It's
that
the
is
growth.
why I know if I think of myself going, oh, if I was to think about going back to a job, I
Yeah.
struggle with that idea because I know that that's no longer me.
No, you're halfway
That's
to the
not
next
who I
island
am.
already. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm.
And it's like when you're talking about that journey, I've already gone past the halfway mark,
Yeah,
and it's like it'd be too detrimental to
yeah,
go
yeah,
back
yeah.
the other
Yep.
way. And if I was to go back the other way, it would have to be on my terms,
Exactly.
absolutely on my terms. And then
Exactly.
that means being very clear as to what I expect from it and for how long. It's being
Yeah.
very clear about that, and that's where that strategy comes in.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's also, I think, you have to be aligned with the direction that you want to go in, and if you're not aligned, then you've got pivot. That's where the pivot comes from.
So you got
So
to
if
do the
you
foundational work.
have started something and
Mm.
you feel, "Oh, well, no, I'm not. This is not what I want to do." Don't keep doing it for the sake of doing it, because again, that's the pride that kicks in. It's the pivot and go and do something else. Or it could just be that you just need to change what you're doing by a small percentage, and then you love it again. Yeah.
Or start
Um,
laying the foundation, doing the foundational work that we talk about, which is assessing your values, getting really to really know yourself, and then building the new thing that you want to go to in the background so that you can move on from whatever it is that you're doing. So you don't just abandon and blow up your life. You go,
no.
okay, well, we're going to move on and change things or try something
Yeah.
completely different.
Exactly. And
Mm.
like when we talk about that too, because sometimes people have this idea that when they're stuck, it's because they're actually, um, well, I'm going to start that again. People get stuck because they're waiting for certainty, and there's no such
Oh,
thing of that. There's no
yeah.
certainty that's going to occur.
No,
Nothing is certain,
no.
but it's about that alignment, feeling aligned, feeling that you're moving in the right direction. When you don't feel that, everything in your body is screaming at you and you're ignoring it. And that's when the ailments start to happen, the headaches, really,
Jay.
really heavy in the shoulders, the neck pain, the back
Yep.
pain, all those types of things is
Yep.
your body saying to you, what are you doing? Wake up.
All the
And it could
tension. I'm
also
carrying all the
be,
tension. Yeah.
and if you are on the path of doing something that you love doing, but fear and that is stepping in the way because you can't see around the corner, and then you allow that fear to pull you back, it's the same sort of thing. You're going to get ailments and everything like that. So it's realizing where your fear is actually trying to drive you versus where your heart is trying to challenge you. And it's
Absolutely.
challenge you because it's about that growth. It's about becoming, you want to achieve a certain thing. And in order to get there, you've got to become a certain person. And
Yes,
so
you
these
do.
challenges help you become that person.
You
And
know,
they're
it's
molding into
so
that.
true. So true. I asked my obstetrician once, I said to him, we were having a philosophical conversation. I said, why do you think it hurts so much to give birth? Why does Mother Nature make it so agonizing and such a long haul thing to give birth? And he said, oh, that's easy. He said, it's because it allows you to then absolutely cherish this thing that you really struggle to bring into the world. And I think that anything that you do that is worth doing is a bit of a struggle, unfortunately. Life wasn't meant to be easy. But the question that you need to ask yourself is if you're staying stuck because you're fearful or, you're afraid of the growth, um, what evidence do you have that things are going to be okay? Because if you're staying stuck for stability's sake or for security's sake, let's be honest, there's no job really that's secure. You could be gone
Nothing's
tomorrow.
secure.
There's no guarantees that your house will be there tomorrow, that something could happen. There's no guarantee that the partner that you're continuing to put up with isn't going to leave you tomorrow. There's absolutely no guarantees. The only security and stability you have is the good habits and the growth and the capacity to deal with things that you create within yourself when you go on these journeys of growth.
Yeah, because I think that's what pivoting does. Pivoting helps you grow,
Mm.
and it helps you build a new skill as
Yeah,
well. You start developing new skills, and that is what's going to help you on the new path
yeah.
that you've got as well.
Build your
Because if you're no
confidence.
longer growing on the path that you have, and whether that is job, relationship, finances, it doesn't really matter, spiritual. If you're not growing in that space
Yeah.
and you're stagnant,
Yep.
then you do die. You rot from
You
within,
do. You rot.
literally.
You rot from the inside out. I feel it. I feel it career wise and emotionally and spiritually here because I feel like I'm, my world has shrunk and I don't like that. And
Mhm.
I think your brain is a bit like, and your spirit and your body is a bit like an elastic band. You can really stretch elastic bands and they will not go back to their original shape. They kind of will, but they've been stretched. Once you've been stretched, and the other thing is, don't wait for the perfect time. There's no such thing as the perfect time. There's optimal times and good times. Make the decision before the decision is made for you.
Yeah. Because if the decision's made for you, again, it's not going to be, you're not going to feel great about it.
You're going to be scrambling, going, oh shit, what are we
Yeah.
doing now? That's not good. So, like, if you know something isn't working, I used to work with a lot of, I think I've mentioned this before, women in domestic violence relationships, and they knew the relationship wasn't good for them. And they knew that he was never going to change, but they lived in hope that things could go back to the way they were at the start when he was love bombing
Yeah.
them. And that they could maybe, and over the years, like, this is the frog in the water that we all do in different situations, that adapted and adjusted, and just little by little by little, you give parts of yourself away. And then you get to the point, down the track, and you're like, shit, this is where I am. Now, the danger in that is the amount of work that you've got to do to get back to yourself just becomes huge and overwhelming. And the fear and the confidence that it knocks in you ends up making you a shadow of your former self. And then you've got the work of pivoting and changing your life, as well as trying to rebuild yourself from the inside out.
Yeah, yeah, because it's pulled you down so much. And I think that's the thing is people can start performing in a relationship and start wearing a mask when they know that they're not in it for the right reasons,
Yeah.
and they stay there because it's comfortable, because they believe it's a sense of security. And that's where that resentment, that emotional exhaustion, and even silence starts to play
Yeah.
out. And
Yeah.
they're all signs to sort of say it's time to move on. I just want to kind of give some examples when we
Mm.
talk about this from the difference between, say, when you need to pivot versus a course correction
Yes.
versus realigning, because they
Yeah. Great.
they are all very similar, but they're also distinctly different. Now, I mentioned before about pivoting is when a bigger shift is actually needed in your life, and that
Yeah.
the path that you're on is actually no longer right, and you know that, and that's when you need to do a pivot.
Yeah.
A course correction is when you're actually on the path that still actually matters a lot to you,
Yeah.
and you just need a different approach or an,
Yeah.
an adjustment on that path. And that's when we were talking about pulling out more of the tools out of your toolbox, doing absolutely everything you can to know that you've done your best,
Yes.
before you make a decision to actually pivot, for instance. And realignment is returning to yourself
Yeah.
before making any external move, like going within and asking, what do I need to do? And we've spoken about that, going within your body, or your body telling you, all those types of things. So there's three distinct differences.
Yeah.
And it's figuring out, based on where you are, which one you need to do. Do I need to pivot, which is going on to a completely different path because what I'm on right now does not work? Do I need to course correct because the path that I'm on still matters to me?
Mm.
Or do I need to realign before I make a pivot or a course correction? I need to go within to figure out what it is that I need to do
Yep.
externally.
Yep. Because I don't have the answers yet, and I don't know what I
Yeah.
know that I'm not happy, but I'm not quite sure what that means and how that looks.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you are able to, I suppose, observe those three areas to figure out which one it is that you
Mm.
need to do, and then do the change that you need to do. So whether that is pivoting, whether it's the course correction or the alignment. And
Yep.
that's why I suppose when we were speaking earlier on, I was giving different examples for different things. And that may have been a bit confusing, but that's purely because it depends on the situation as to whether you are in a situation where you know you have to totally make a new path in life,
Yep.
or whether you need to course correct, or I just need to go in because I haven't been doing that. I've been allowing my external environment to dictate to me and allowing my fear and anxiety to make the choices rather than
Yeah.
stopping, observing, and
Mhm.
going, okay, what do I need to do in this instance?
Yep. Or do I need to take the skills and even the disappoint and remembering, I think this is a really important thing to remember too, is that if you do have to pivot or course correct, it doesn't mean that you did the wrong thing or that the time spent going down that other path was a waste of time. It wasn't. It taught you a lot about yourself. It taught you this isn't for me. I'm not happy in this instance. There's other things out there that I'm probably going to enjoy more. So it's all been about you never waste a minute that you've learned about yourself. You've always learned something, and that's never wasted. That's some of the most awful and hardest lessons I've ever had have taught me more about myself than anything.
I agree. And they're the lessons that I love, and I think that's probably why I like personal growth so much as well, because
Mm.
I learned so much about myself, even though it's freaky when you're doing personal growth and sometimes you don't like what you see,
Yes.
and it can be a hard slog.
Mm.
But it's also who I have become through that. And it's not who I've become, it's who am I allowing myself to be, because I'm allowing my true self to come out. I'm allowing myself to step into what I would refer to as my power as such, to
Yeah.
step into my authentic self and live
Yeah.
life from that perspective. And personal growth has been the thing that has given me that.
Yeah.
So it's also been the thing that has helped me become the observer of my own behaviors.
Mm.
Because I get to understand myself so well that I kind of go, oh, I've been triggered here. Okay, why?
Yeah.
Why did
It's
this
so
trigger me?
powerful. It's so
Yeah,
powerful. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Recognizing when you're spiraling, or being
Mm.
able to recognize when
Yep.
you need to pivot, course correct, or realign. That has all come from being able to understand myself really well through personal growth, and through my own metaphysical studies. So I think it's personal growth is still the foundation of building a better relationship with yourself. You'll then be
Absolutely.
able to make better informed decisions
Mm.
on the
Yeah.
different paths of your life, because
Well, the other
you
thing,
understand yourself. You know what your values are. You know what
yeah.
your strengths are. You know what you want in life. You have a vision for where you want to go, and you are committed to that.
Well, you can't do anything else once your eyes have been opened. And, it also provides that protective factor as well, because bad shit's going to happen in life. And I always find this. People say, don't focus on your fears because they'll come true. Well, unfortunately, life has a way of pushing on the points of view that you are fearful about and making those fears happen for you a little bit, because that's where the biggest growth is. That's the lesson that you need to learn. Why are you afraid of it? Because you know that it's something that's deep in you that needs resolving and you need to work on it. So life's going to do that to you. And I think it's so much more efficacious if you can just accept that's what's happening. That's why it's going to happen. It's happening for me. It's not happening because I'm a bad person or because I've done things wrong or whatever. It's just showing me a different way to move forward. And like you're saying, sitting in that observation mode stops you from internalizing shame or saying, I am the problem. Instead, you observe it and go, okay, I've been given a problem. Now I need to sit back and focus and choose my response,
Hmm.
not
And
react.
well, because the reaction is the fear, the anxiety, and everything like that. And if you find yourself in a pattern that keeps repeating itself, and I know that we've spoken about this with yourself with jobs, and you were saying how there's a repeating pattern that kept happening
Yeah, there is.
until
Yeah.
you realized and went, I've outgrown that. That's no longer me.
Mm.
And I think that's what happens when you have a repeating situation that occurs, like you may change path and the similar thing happens again, and you change path and the similar thing happens again. And that's because the lesson hasn't been learnt. But what has
Yeah.
been the lesson? What is the lesson? The
Mm.
lesson usually is that you are no longer that person. That's
Correct. Yeah.
usually the lesson.
Yeah.
But we get caught up in the old programming and think that that's who we are. We label ourselves, we identify ourselves with this particular thing that's happening over there, and we
Mm.
keep repeating that same pattern over and over and over again,
Force
expecting
ourselves
different
back. Yeah.
results,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's never going to happen. But when it will actually start to change, when that pattern will actually start to break, is when you come to the realization that you are no longer that person,
Yeah.
that you've
Yeah.
outgrown that person, and
Exactly.
that you need to step into that other path that's going to freak you out a bit, that's a little bit challenging, that's going
Yep.
to make you grow.
Yep.
There's a lot of unknowns because it's a totally different path. But I tell you what, when you do step onto it, your life will blossom. And you still
Oh,
may
yeah.
go through a little bit of fear and anxiety,
Mm.
purely because the old you is still trying to hold on. And you may even go through a grieving process of letting go
Yeah.
of the old you.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of,
Mm-hmm.
and because I know when I started this business, and Jeff did the same thing when he left his job for probably a good 6 months. We were both in a grieving phase because we identified ourselves and we didn't realize how much we actually identified ourselves with our roles in our jobs.
I think that's natural and normal. I think everybody does that, and you don't
Exactly.
realize until
But you
you
don't
take a
realize
step
how
away.
much, right? And
Mm.
so you go through this grieving of letting
Mm.
that go.
Yeah.
And now I can't even see myself being that person anymore.
It's
Like,
funny you say that because when I left my ex-husband, I'd been contemplating this for a long time, and I did it very carefully and cautiously. And like we discussed, I used every tool in my toolbox. I assessed whether it was me. I always go, first of all, is it me? No.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Have I done the wrong thing? Have I tried everything? Yeah. Okay. So what is it about the situation? And I went and enrolled myself with a clinical psychologist. And I said, I need you to coach me through this process before I pull the trigger on this relationship, because I think I've done everything. I need to talk to you as an independent person, because I'm blowing up my life here and I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. That's what I'm really unhappy. I'm really disengaged, blah, blah, blah. And I went through that whole process very methodically, very cautiously before I did that. And I'd been thinking about it a long time. And my feelings were already out the door. Everything was out the door. My trust, my respect was all gone. I'd done my best and I knew I couldn't do that anymore. We were just wrong for each other. Whether we were right at the start, we'd grown in different directions. That's how it
Yeah.
was. So even though I went through that process really mindfully, really carefully, and I knew and accepted that I would lose a lot of the wealth that I had built and I would lose a lot of my business that I had done, it still made me grieve. I actually grieved the loss of being a wife. Isn't that
Mm.
interesting? Because
Yeah.
I like being very monogamous, very, very much stable and secure. It's part of something for me that I've never really believed in divorce because my mum was married 5 times. So for me, divorce is like a failure.
Yeah.
I really don't want to do that. And I had to really go with my clin-site to talk about, okay, well, let's weigh this up. How does this look? How does it look for the kids? How does it look for you? And we went back and forth a lot. And we really stepped into that metacognition, thinking about thinking space to really detach and assess everything. And when I worked it all out, I knew in my heart, in my mind, in my spirit that I had to get out of that marriage and it was best for me and the children. But I still grieved the old identity that I had living in
Mm.
that home, being that wife, being that person. It had nothing to do with him. So you grieve identities that you move away from. And that's powerful because the temptation then is to either go, I said, I'm never getting married again. I'm done.
Yeah.
Or, and she warned me about this. She said, we tend to go one of two ways when we get a divorce. We go, we're never getting married again, or we leap into the next relationship that comes along and does a rebound. She said, both of those are unhelpful. You want the middle ground,
Yeah.
the thoughtful
Totally.
middle ground where you think, and this is applicable to everything, not just relationships, but obviously jobs. The thoughtful middle ground, where have you been thinking? Where do you want to head? What are the things that you value? Really sit there and work out, okay, how's the next chapter of my life going to look?
Yeah.
Mm.
And if you need a coach or a counsellor to help you do that, then by all means tap into
So good
that,
for me.
because if you
Yeah.
can have someone there who is not emotionally involved
Yeah, no,
and they can help guide you to make those clear decisions, then that's perfect.
I have no
That's
agenda.
absolutely perfect.
Well,
And
that's
so
what
take
we do.
advantage of that.
You have
Because
no
I know
agenda.
that I did that a long time ago.
Mm.
I'm going to use it from a career perspective. I was working for myself in the nutrition field,
Yep.
and I was starting to get pretty dissatisfied, even though I'd been in it for about 12 years at that point, and
Wow.
I was loved it initially, and I loved the whole idea of helping people with their health, because that thing that drove me to do that was after my cancer. After my cancer, I went off and I studied nutrition. I ended up helping people with their health and things
Yep.
like that. And then I realized through that that mindset was the biggest thing.
Key. Yeah.
And through that growth of understanding mindset, I started to realize that metaphysics was even bigger behind it and connecting back to your authentic self. So it's
Yep.
interesting how, when you pull that things back. So when
Layers.
went down the nutrition path and built a business around that, the driver for me initially was so people wouldn't actually get cancer. I wanted to prevent people from getting cancer. And if I could help them prevent what I went through,
Yeah.
that was great. And then that I suppose the lessons that I learned, the growth of an individual that I had become through that had hit its peak,
Yeah.
and it was time to move on.
Yep.
And I couldn't figure out. I knew it was time to move on, and there was a part of me that was a bit sad about it because I was so passionate about this,
Yeah.
for quite a few years, and
Yep.
that passion was starting to die out, and I
Yeah.
was starting
Yeah.
to find it a bit of a burden. But because of how I used to feel about it, I was trying to hold on to it. And I kind of went, no, I'm so bloody unhappy. I don't want, and because I was forcing myself to hold on to it. So then I ended up getting a coach to
Yep.
help me through this. And I went, this is what's going on. I don't know what to do next. I'm thinking I may go back to the corporate world for a while, just while I figure out. And this was the thing. I thought I'll go back to the corporate world while I figure out what it is that I want to do,
Yeah.
because I've got no idea what I want to do.
Yep.
And so they were helping me unpack that. And then it became, oh, well, it looks like project management or program management would be really, really, really cool. And I thought, oh, well, okay, well, I'll go
Yep.
off and do some courses on that. So I went off and I started studying on the side whilst I was still in my business
Mm.
to, get certification in project and program management. And then
Strategic
bang, I landed a
transition.
role.
That's a strategic transition.
Yeah,
That's a
and then I
plan. That's
landed a
smart.
role straight away as a program manager, and I
Mm.
was in that field for over 10 years as well in my career, like, and building from that and going into different areas beyond that. But so I never actually did project management. I went straight into program management and built things from there. And
Yep.
it was quite, and then that path, and I enjoyed that for a while. And that path grew, and I grew as a person. And then I hit a point again where I just went, I'm actually
No.
not growing here anymore. It's time
Yep.
to move on. It's time
Yep.
to pivot. And so then, well, actually, in that point, I didn't actually pivot. I actually did a course correction because I went, oh, I'll do a course correction to a different area that's similar to program management, but it's at a higher level. So doing portfolio and governance and stakeholder advisory and all of that type of stuff. And so I stepped into the consulting arena around that. So it was kind of like I took the skills from here and I brought them across to here. I did a
Course
course
corrected.
correct.
Yeah.
And then that got to a point where I went, no, I'm actually over the corporate world. I want
Mm.
to go back and work for myself, but I want to do something that really makes my heart sing. And
So you
then
did a
hence where I
realignment.
am today.
You
And
did a
so that's where I
realignment.
pivoted altogether and went
Mm.
bang. But
Yep.
I went in internally first and did a lot of work internally to figure out, is this what I really want to do? And it was like, yeah, this is what I really want to do. And then it was, well, take that step
Yep.
and do it. And I had the whole strategy of, well, I'll still keep working in the corporate job whilst I build this over here, and I'll keep saving, putting our finances together and making sure we've got a lot of savings behind us. And I did all of that, but the corporate stuff just imploded
Oh,
without
really?
me even doing anything. It just kind of imploded, and
You
I just
weren't
kind of
meant to
went,
be there
well,
anymore.
okay, this wasn't the plan.
No.
But then I thought, okay, fine. That means I just have to do this. So I just jumped in it.
Yep.
And, I had enough money behind us savings wise, but it was like I jumped in it. But sometimes that's what happens is you may have the perfect plan and
Yep.
going, this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to gradually transition over here.
Yeah.
But something over here stops you from being able to transition because you're meant to go full holus bolus in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't get to choose the timing of
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the same thing happened with Jeff. It was like, well, he's still working. That's okay. And I can build this and he's still working. And then it just imploded. And you just kind of go,
Stuff does that,
okay.
doesn't it? Oh.
And sometimes that's that part of, if you're not meant to be there,
Yeah. It's funny because we've
you'll
just done
get
the
thrown
same
onto the
thing.
part.
We've just
Yeah.
done the same thing. We had a 2-year timeline for staying here in Tasmania. Things have just imploded, and we're thinking, maybe that's not going to happen now. Maybe we just need to go. But funnily, Ruby and I have been feeling like we just want to go for ages.
Yeah.
And interestingly, when I divorced my ex-husband, it was probably 2 good years. I hung in there for 2 years out of guilt, shame, fear, worry over the children, knowing that I needed to go. And when I look back on that, I realized I should have left well before. So
Yeah.
sometimes we stay too long and we don't realize that we're staying too long. Conversation I've just had with my husband, stayed far too long, stayed in a role that he just knew that he wasn't getting respected in and was treated badly in. Shouldn't have stayed there. Should have moved on. But there's a million reasons why we stay too long. And a lot of the time it's to do with the perceived sense of responsibility we have to our loved ones and the people around us, or the people, our parents, and expectations and all of the disappointment that people are going to have if we make these changes. But I would suggest that if you are being anchored down by your associates and your family, you need to stop and have a really good look. Either have a good conversation with your family and go, listen, it's my life and I'm actually entitled to do what I feel I want to do, because a lot of the time they're only trying to protect you. It's just that their advice is misplaced.
Yeah.
And if your friends or your close people can't accept you getting out of your box and growing and changing and moving, it makes them feel uncomfortable. Maybe you've outgrown that friendship.
Well, I look at it from that, there you get signs, and we were talking about that. You get those signs when it's time to make a change or when to pivot or when to
Yep.
course correct, etc. And usually those signs are things like that you keep overriding your own, what you know, or your own truth. You're just overriding it. And that's what you were saying, that, people stay in something too long because you just keep overriding it. Your body starts to feel really heavy. That's another
Yeah.
one. You feel contracted. You get up in the morning and you're not springing out of bed. You're dragging yourself out of bed,
Yeah.
and you just feel depleted in
Yeah.
certain areas of your life. You just kind of go, ugh.
Yeah, totally. And you just, yeah, I mean, I know when Joe was in a previous role that he did get out of, and I just said, get out of this role, you've got to get out. And I pushed him. I can
Yeah,
remember he would get up in the morning in the dark and he would sit on the edge of the bed. He'd put on his uniform, he'd sit down on the edge of the bed and he'd go, I think I've said this before,
yeah,
and then he'd put his shoes on and he'd sigh. And I just said, you are dragging yourself there like a half dead person. It is time to get out. And he was quite comfortable there, actually. He could have stayed there for another 2 years. They've only just shut down sort of a year ago. He could have stayed there. They were all going, what's wrong with you? You're crazy. Why are you leaving? And he just said, I've asked you to, formalize my position, the work that I do here. You won't do it. I'm getting offers from other places. I'd rather take the risk. And they thought he was mad. They're like, you get to go home to your family every night. You get to work 4 days a week. You're well paid. Why would you challenge the status quo? And he's like, 'cause I'm not satisfied. I'm not happy. And I feel stagnated.
Well, I think you said the words yourself just then. Challenge the status quo. It's the status quo. Why would you want to be in a
Yeah.
status quo? It's like, yeah. I think there we talk about that feeling of heaviness, and
Yeah.
I know when I talk about my nutrition business, that's what was happening to me towards the end there. I was starting to
Yeah.
feel heavy. If I look
Yep.
at the corporate world, exactly the same thing.
Mm.
I was always I was constantly overriding what I knew or my truth, like
Yep.
pushing it down.
Yep.
Um, and that's what causes the body to start feeling heavy, because you're actually not listening to yourself, and you would start. I would start to have the little anxiety attacks and things like that. Not massive anxiety attacks, but I'd
Mm.
start to have little anxiety attacks. I wouldn't be sleeping very well. I'd be restless. My heart was not singing. I felt as if my soul was completely depleted.
Yeah.
It was killing me from the inside. That's how I kind of look at it. And
Totally get it.
that
Yeah.
that's that feeling of you just feel drained. You totally feel
There's no
drained, and you
challenge.
know you're doing the wrong thing, but you just
Yeah.
keep doing it because it used to fit,
Mm.
but it doesn't fit anymore. And
That's
so,
right. That's right.
and you're not willing to accept the fact that you've actually outgrown that and it's time to move on. And I think that's the thing, is when you're outgrown it and come to that realization and that recognizing, that's okay, because it's part of life. We are meant to outgrow things. We are meant to build new skills. We are meant to grow as individuals. And as you do that, you will outgrow situations. And whether that is friendships, whether that is career, even spiritually, even
Yeah.
financially, there's
Yep.
all these different things that you outgrow. And
It's
when
frowned upon. It's frowned
yeah,
upon in our culture. In our culture, it's like, be grateful that you've got a roof over your head. Be grateful that you're in a good position. I mean, I know that I was absolutely, one woman rang me and lectured me for leaving my ex-husband, saying he's a good guy. Why are you leaving him? And I said, not something I would explain to you. By the way, thanks for letting me know what sort of a friend you are. Don't call me again. And we live in communities and societies that frown on those sorts of things. Oh, you've upended your whole life. Why are you doing something different? Why are you being different? And why are you doing something that we don't have the guts to do?
yeah. Well, it goes back to what you were saying that Tony Robbins says, the cost of remaining the same is stronger than the cost of change.
Yeah.
And until that balance goes the other way, until it flips the other way, where
Yep.
the fear of change is less than the fear of staying where you're at.
Yeah.
And I know, like, if I look at myself, I got to that point where I've always wanted to build a business from a particular perspective. I've wanted to do personal growth stuff for a long time and work from that space. And I didn't want to I'm getting older, and I've mentioned this in a few podcasts, where I didn't want to get to a point of regretting that. And so
Oh, yeah.
the feeling of regret and the
Yeah.
fear of regretting doing something was stronger
Yeah.
than staying the same.
Yeah.
And
We're so
and
risk averse. We're so
for the
risk
sake of,
averse.
what we perceive as safety. And
Calculated
yeah,
risks are the
yeah,
best things to do when you're uncertain and you've exhausted all avenues. Take a calculated risk, because I tell you what, it's not going to say on my headstone, she didn't risk it all. She just sat there and stagnated and turned into a fucking potato. Because I feel like that's how you just turn into a potato. I'm feeling very potatoey right now, so it's time to move. And when you've done everything you can do, check. check, look at it, make it an assessment, make an intelligent strategic assessment. Is it me? Maybe. Do I fit here anymore? Maybe not. Have I done everything I possibly can to make it work? Yes. If I continue to work at it, will I see diminishing or improving returns? If the returns are diminishing, then we're looking at a structural situation, and maybe then we need to change environments. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't fit here any longer, I'm going to change. But then you've got to have
Yeah.
the guts to do the long dark of the soul
Yeah.
that will guarantee come in. And the best way to do that is just to accept and say, I know this is coming. So I've
Yep,
just got
and
to
allow
accept
it.
it. And,
Yeah.
the optimum level of stress is about 40%. It's a myth that having a life that's completely stress-free is good for you. You actually need some
You need
healthy levels
stress
of
to
stress.
grow.
You do.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
need it to grow.
Mm.
I wanna add in there because we've spoken a lot about, business and relationships, but we haven't spoken too much about the financial side of things
Oh,
as well.
yes.
I kind of touched on it earlier on.
Yes.
But financial stuckness, it's it's not a practical thing when we look at financial stuckness, because it could be that you're kind of going, I want to earn more money, but it's not happening, and I'm constantly finding myself in this space of just being able to make ends meet, or not barely making ends
Yeah.
meet, and identifying yourself with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you become identified with that, and you think that you are not capable or even uh, worthy of earning more than that, or
Yeah.
being more than that. And that, a lot of that is a identity label, and it's usually fear and scarcity and self-worth wounds from our past that we've actually inherited. We've usually inherited it from our parents or people that we're around, like our social group,
Mhm.
and that's shaping us of what we earn and what we receive and what we hold on to from a
Yeah.
perspective of money.
Yep. Yep.
And you need to really ask yourself the thing about, what am I believing about money? What am I believing about success? What am I believing about safety?
Mm.
And what I'm allowed to have in my life?
Yeah.
Like, what limitations am I putting on myself? Because literally, you're the only person who's putting a ceiling on you. No one else is. I used to look at it in the workplace and go, I really, I want to strive to become a senior manager and all that type of thing. And then I'd go, oh, they're stopping me. They're putting a ceiling on me. No, I was the person who was putting a ceiling on me, not them, because I believed that even though I wanted it, I didn't believe I was worthy of it.
Ah, okay. Mhm.
Okay. And so I would put a ceiling on myself, and then what would actually happen is my environment would mirror back to me that level of, limitation that I was putting on myself.
Mm. Mm.
And it wasn't until I broke that limitation did that start to change.
Started to shift in the same workplace, or you
In
had
the
to move
same workplace,
workplaces?
yep, in the same
Interesting.
work. Sometimes you may have to jump a workplace
Mm.
if
Mm.
they're not, if you're willing to take that, and you go, well, I'm going to move because I know that I am worthy,
Worth more.
and then you move and you do get more,
Mm.
and it's proof.
Mm.
But it was in the same workplace. I jumped considerably. I jumped like something like 80,000
Mm.
in a matter of 6 months.
It's
So
huge. Mm.
yeah, a huge amount. And so you've really got to ask yourself that question around, what are you believing around, as I said, money, success, and
Mm.
safety, etc.
Mm. Yep.
And then do that realignment. This is where we were talking about going within yourself and doing some practical work internally, and also doing some strategy planning to
Yep.
help you heal that identity that you've had with it,
Yeah.
to release that, understand where it's come from, and then realize that you are worthy of more.
Absolutely.
So that's where the financial stuck, that's what that kind of looks like when you think about it from that
Mm.
perspective.
Yep.
And a lot of people do find themselves there, where they feel that they're stuck in a certain amount that they can earn. You may have people who are millionaires who want to become billionaires, and it's the same sort of thing, that they're going, why can't I break this millionaire thing? Why can't I break it? And it is a self-belief thing. It is an identity thing that you put on
Mm.
yourself. It is a self-worth thing. And it doesn't matter how much you're bringing in. That's all it is. So it's about breaking that pattern so you can earn more,
And putting the
because
work
you
in
are worth more.
to change
And
as well.
if you
Mm.
look at it from the perspective of metaphysics, you are infinite intelligence here experiencing this world. Now, if you think of infinite intelligence, we're made up of the same stuff that, the stars and the planets and everything out there are made up of.
Mhm.
You are not limited. You are
Mm.
totally unlimited.
Yep.
And the thing that is limiting you is your own belief system. It's your own programming. And you can change your beliefs. It's very easy to change your beliefs. It takes time, but it's easy. It's just a thought.
Yep.
And It's about pulling out those weeds that no longer support you, planting the bushes and the flowers that do, and then basically feeding them and watering them and nurturing them until they grow, and creating those new neural pathways to show that you are this. And that is why when you do personal growth work, you do grow, you do become that better version of you. You step into your authentic self, and the old identity is gone.
Yeah. You become unstoppable.
You do.
That's the flip side of all the hard work and the journey, the transformative journey, which is tough. The flip side of it is, again, sacrifice, giving up something to get something far better.
Yep.
Mm. Yep.
And the same thing goes with spiritually. You know, if you feel stuck spiritually, it's the same thing. You're just feeling disconnected.
Yep.
You're not connecting within yourself. And it's about going back and going, well, realign with yourself, go back into yourself, sit with yourself.
Yeah.
Don't hide from who you actually are.
Yeah.
Face who you are.
Don't turn away from those scary feelings, because they're actually a message.
Yeah.
Those scary feelings are a message. And if I've found that the best way to unpack that, and especially being a person that has anxiety and a lived experience of PTSD, I used to be in a panic about feeling my feelings and listening to my mind because it was terrifying. And now I find that when I quickly do that, the fear drops away. Mm. Yep.
It's amazing, isn't it?
So
let's go with some questions that may help our audience to do some self-assessment. What do you think?
that's a good one. Yep.
Okay. What about, here's one for you. Where in my life do I feel more stuck right now?
Yep. That's a good one.
Awareness starts first. So you've got to know where you're stuck if you're feeling stuck. So that's your first one. Where in my life do I feel most stuck right now? Yeah. Do you have any?
It's a skill. It's a skill set that you build to understand yourself better. Understanding yourself is a whole skill set. And when you get good at that, at first it feels tricky, because I'm obviously not as far along as yourself. But at first it's like, at first you're like, oh God, how am I going to do this? And then you get better and better and better at it. It's like a muscle, you build it. Where am I stuck? That's such a good question. It's such a hard question.
It is.
And I think getting a pen and paper, lying and thinking with it, just sort of laying quiet and listening to yourself and feeling it, and then get a pen and paper, write it down.
Yeah.
Write down what comes into your head.
Another question you could ask yourself is, what feels out of integrity with me right now as well?
What's not
Because
working?
values are really important. So if you're doing something that goes against your values, it's really important to look at that and go, where do I feel, totally out of alignment in that space? And what would I change if I trusted what I already know?
Yep. Those are really amazing, powerful questions.
I'd like to add to that one too. What would I change if I actually trusted myself?
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. If I wasn't fearful, if I knew that I would be able to walk through the fire, do what it needed to take, what would I change?
What would
It
I
might
do
be
differently?
might be big, it might be small, whatever it is. Whenever you get close to self-honesty, it's always better.
And remember, the thing though is you don't need to make big change. We've spoken about this many times. It's just 1%, 1% pivot, 1% change, 1% course correction, and you'll land in a totally different direction.
And shift. Powerful stuff.
A little shift. So if you're feeling stuck, and it's not always a problem that you need to fix, it's just an awareness and observation of what you need to do differently, whether you need to pivot, whether you need to course correct, or whether you need to realign.
And the
And
answers
that's all
lie
it really
within you.
is. It's an invitation to really become honest with yourself.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's a message. Something's not right. Something needs to change. And then you just get to figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. So we hope you got a lot out of today. And if you did, please, we'd love to hear from you. Provide comments below. That'd be fantastic. Or come and connect with us in the alignment room in school. If you go to school, you'll find us there. Just search the alignment room. And we've set up a whole community in there where we do talk about alignment and what to do differently at different times. We run a Sunday session called Chat and Chill, where we just get ready for the week ahead and talk about the things that we want to let go of, pretty much.
Come and ask us questions. Come and hang out. Yeah, we'll be happy to, help you work through stuff. If you've got a problem, let's go talk about it.
Exactly. So the link to the alignment room is below. Remember to think beautifully and live brilliantly. And we love you guys, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Take care.
Bye.
We'd like to say a huge thank you to our incredible audience for your continued support. Our mission is to ignite your spark, empowering you to be a beacon of light for others. We'd love to hear from you. So if you've got any questions that you would like answered in future episodes or just want to share some insights, connect with us on our Facebook community page. If you're looking for additional resources, go to our website. You'll find the link below. And remember, the absolute best way to help us grow is to share this episode with your friends and family and to subscribe to the Art of Beautiful Thinking podcast. So until next time, think beautifully and live brilliantly.